we recommend listening to the CW Pod with a glass of Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Grown, distilled, well-rested, and bottled in Erling, Iowa. Now from the Channel Seed Studios, this is the CW Pod, fueled by Steeple Ridge.
What is up? I'm fired up for today's show. Thank you so much for joining me. Nice to get away from basketball for just about 2 hours here, and then we'll be doing another Iowa State basketball podcast. But we are here in the dog days of winter, and I have a special guest, my pastor. Pastor Mike's in here today. How are we doing, sir?
We're claiming each other today,
yes,
right?
I love it.
We're going public.
I love it. No, thank you for coming in. I have a lot to talk to you about. I did this, so it was a different iteration of this show. It was back in the old when this thing wasn't on Iowa Everywhere, and Pastor Hibben, I still have people who come up to me and talk to me about that episode.
Is that right?
No pressure.
I'm feeling it.
My point is, though, that people enjoyed the authentic conversation between a rube like me and a guy like him who a lot of wisdom there.
That's true. He did a lot of amazing things too in his career.
Yeah, he was in Central Iowa pretty much the entire.
A lot of it, yeah. He planted a church on the east side of Des Moines.
Yes, I knew about that. Yeah,
really went gangbusters and is doing well. And he was at Ankeny First for a while. Did a great job here. So, he was an impressive guy.
So you came to town after he left, right?
Correct. I followed Pastor Scott. I got here in July of 2017.
Okay, July of 2017. And first of all, I want to thank our sponsor, Steeple Ridge Bourbon. It's funny. I had to ask Pastor Mike. I'm like, hey, can I give you a bottle of whiskey on the air?
And I was like, I know some people. There's almost always a use for this.
There you go, sir. Bottle of Iowa Everywhere Steeple Ridge Bourbon for you.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Iowa Bourbon right there. They do a great job. And appreciate Pat Hoffman and his wonderful family for giving me the opportunity to do stuff like this, because I want to tell this. First of all, give us your background real quick so everybody can understand. You're an Iowan.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm just outside Alden, Iowa, in the 80s during the farm crisis, and baled hay and walk beans, all the stuff, and listened to Pete Taylor do the Cyclones games on Saturday afternoon, nursing my bruises from high school football games. I played high school sports in a small school, so I can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that's about it. They needed warm bodies more than talent in those days. I went off to Cornell College after that and majored in business and religion. Worked in warehousing for about a year and a half, and did not care enough about it to do the fight. And so through some thinking and discerning and praying, I ended up going into ministry. We were in Muscatine for 7 years, Lamar's, Iowa for 4 years, and then Davenport the most recent 10 before coming back to Central Iowa.
Wow. I feel like that might be another podcast for another day, because the decision to become a pastor.
It's a fun story. Yeah. And it would take up parts of a podcast to get there.
And I'm always fascinated because it feels like, and I believe the other two pastors at Ankeny First, they weren't just like, oh, I'm going to go to high school and go to college and I'm just going to be a pastor, right? Like,
no, not one of us did that.
Yeah, there was like a journey that all of you have to get to this point.
And all of us had a career outside the church before we came into it. Mine was pretty short because I'm an impatient person by nature.
Understood.
Did not like doing stuff I hated to do. But all of us have been on a journey to get where we are. And if you've heard one pastor's call story, you've heard one pastor's call story. They are all different.
Yeah. It's super interesting what leads you here. And so I'm an open book to my audience. And it's funny, I joined Pastor Mike's small group on Monday nights, and the running joke is that I can't shut up, that I'm like doing a podcast, because I just like, I can't stop thinking.
Right.
I feel like it's a problem. Like I wish that I could turn my brain off.
We need to get you on the couch and kind of walk through why.
I got one of those too, and I think she's tired of me.
So you need to spread it around, share the burden. Well, what I've learned is that I am too good at the awkward silence to do a podcast very well. So different job. That's the whole thing.
So I actually, I feel bad because you came in 2017 and I had never really met you until a couple of months ago. And this is what made me want to get Pastor Mike on here. So it was after the election, and we're sitting at the Christian Life Center here in Ankeny. And I always enjoyed your speaking before then. I'd known who you were. I just had never, I to be honest, I hadn't gone to church much, and we're going to get into that. And because I think that's a bigger conversation that could impact a lot of people. And I also want to make it known, like, we're not like trying to, like, this isn't like a recruitment thing or anything like that.
We're not coming to your house after the show's over, or anything like that.
The reason I wanted to have Mike on is because you gave a sermon after the election. And I said to my wife when we were driving home, I go, that guy just did the impossible, because he just made everybody in that room feel pretty good about like where we're at, which is incredibly difficult to do. And I wanted to have a deeper conversation today about just humanity and kindness and in the current structure of like our life, because I see this even in sports where it's like we're all on Cyclone Fanatic, right? You're all Iowa State fans, but then it'll get split up where, oh, you're a big donor and you don't even donate. You suck. Or it's,
why do you even wear the shirt?
yeah. Or it's like, hey, the Democrat ones versus the Republican ones. And it, like, you can watch them. I just watch them like eat each other alive. Mm-hmm. And there was something about that sermon that day that spoke to me, because I feel like just with what I do for a living, even sports outside of it, I just meet a lot of people and I hear opinions all the time. And I know you know what that's like.
And some of them are very valuable and helpful, and some of them are opinions you can hold.
But you made me like, oh, maybe because that guy might have a different belief on guns than I do. Maybe I shouldn't just hate him just because he's different than me. And that's kind of what I wanted to bring you on and talk about today.
Yeah, so we did a sermon series leading up to the election on purpose. One of the few times that we've allowed a cultural moment to shape what we were going to talk about. And we knew it was going to be contentious. We knew that families were going to get together right after the election for Thanksgiving and wonder what to do with your crazy brother-in-law that likes to say stuff.
Yeah.
And so we and about 1,000 United Methodist churches across the nation did a series called Do Unto Others, which builds on Jesus' golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And we came into this really feeling like this is, ground rules on the first day of kindergarten. And we wondered how that was going to play, honestly, because it was so basic. Like, be kind to each other, be kind before the other one does, and all these things. But it was built on the belief that if you have a MAGA sticker on your truck and somebody's got a flat tire with a coexist sticker on the back of their car, you're going to stop them and help them change their tire. Yeah. I mean, that's just what we are about. And we've forgotten about that. There's so much that unites us. There's so much that we can agree is important, but the route to get there is what we fight about. And then we end up not getting there. It's kind of like if I put it up to a vote when we're driving someplace when my kids were little about which route we should take, we might sit in the driveway a long time. Mm-hmm. And that's really where we're at, is we're just not moving forward because we've forgotten that it's about where we're going and who we're with. So we had themes like kindness, harmony. Differences are a good thing when you're committed to something bigger than yourself. That's how it works in music. We talked about respect, where there's attainable respect, where if you do a good job, assessment respect, where if you do a good job, I respect the job that you do. But there's also recognition respect, where you respect the person's humanity. Mm-hmm. And what we have been about over the last while is to say, if I don't respect what you've done, I won't respect who you are. And that's when things go really awry. And so we came up with those 4 themes. And then the 5th week, the one that you're talking about, we were talking about love covering a multitude of sins, love being the thing that unites the whole thing. And in fact, when you shine love through a prism, it breaks out into harmony and respect and kindness, and all these things that we have valued as a people. And we would say these simple things, and you could just watch the light bulbs going off around the room like, oh yeah, like this person that lives across the street from me with a different colored political sign isn't my enemy, he's my neighbor. And let's start there.
How much response did you get? Just curious. I know a guy like me who really, I mean, hadn't been to church much in years. Like I'm not ashamed to admit it. I actually believe that it's like in sports. It's like, I feel like if the Vikings ever win a Super Bowl, it'll almost be more special to me because of the journey.
That's exactly
right.
it. And I'm a Cubs fan.
So you've been there. Aiden's a huge Cubs fan. You guys will be good buddies.
The journey you're talking about, and I'm here to tell you, I thought, oh, now I can die happy with 1-1.
No, you want
the
more?
next year, I am upset by July. Like, what's going on? So how quickly we change.
Well, because I don't know. I'm very flawed. We all are. I guess I got caught up in, and still am, if I'm being brutally honest with you, and I have been in private too, but there's this tribalistic thing out there, and politically, I'm very moderate. Like I really am. I'm from Southwest Iowa. Grew up in a heavy Republic. My grandma once told me that I could marry anybody as long as she wasn't a Democrat. Okay. And then I go to a liberal university and I live in the city and all this stuff and whatever. But I got to the point where, I had kind of fallen into this trap where just because I see one guy on TV who's just incredibly hateful, and he's touting the Bible, that it's like, oh, everybody's like that. Mm-hmm. Right. And your sermon that day made me really rethink that.
Yeah. And I'm glad it resonated with you. We did get some feedback. It wasn't like every single person, but on the way out, instead of just nice sermon preacher without eye contact, which sometimes happens, it was, hey, this right here, I was thinking about that. And that contrasted what we thought we were doing. We thought we were like, okay, they're all going to roll their eyes and say you're doing kindergarten stuff with us. And they're all like, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten, because I think our culture right now is such that if you say it more stridently, it looks like you're more committed to it. And people want to be the most committed person in the room.
Yeah.
And the other thing is outrage sells tickets. If you want to choose between feeling sad or feeling angry, you're going to pick angry because it's powerful. It feels like you're doing something. And as a result, if you want to sell tickets, it gets easier and easier to use fear and outrage and to divide one another for the sake of economics, just to pad your bottom line.
Which is, and it just, there's certain things like, in my opinion, that you shouldn't do that with. And selling a Bible on Inauguration Day really irked me, even to the point where I texted you about it. I'm like, walk me off the ledge. I'm going back.
I'm shaking my head like, yeah, I get it, man.
I'm going back.
There was a movie in the 80s called Fletch Lives, and there was a theme park that was selling Sermon on the Mount batting helmets and stuff like that. And I was like, it's been around forever.
Yes. And this is the challenge we all face, right? It has been around forever. But now you can click a button and the most hateful person on either side of the aisle has an audience of however much it gets spread.
Right.
How is that changed in the world of religion? How is it? Because I assume it can be beneficial.
Well, it's like any tool. It can be used for good and you can spread good things, but you can also create artificial divisions. You can spread misinformation. All of those things are also true. I've been thinking back over my almost 30 years in the ministry now, and the first thing I did with my first expenditure for an education expense was I bought a dictionary. I haven't picked that thing up in over 15 years because I look up the words now on the internet. Well, we thought it was going to be this big age of sharing and we would get to the actual truth and we could all unite around that. And what we've learned is you can find someone who believes 25% more than you do, and they start to make sense, and it just guides us farther and farther from home. And I think most people have had that experience of getting to a spot in life and saying, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we wanted out of that sermon series, was to break the fever. Because it just gets wilder and wilder, farther and farther out there. And at some point, there's got to be a bell that calls us home for supper. And that's really what we were trying to do. I had a friend before we did the sermon series say, I don't know if just be nice to each other is going to meet the moment. And I said, I'm worried about that myself. It just feels like let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and let the differences dissolve. But it turns out it was not that at all. I'll tell you what it meant for me. It not only did it meet I didn't feel like I was at church. I'm assuming that's a compliment in this context.
Yeah, no, it is. It's I didn't feel like, it's just like, well, I didn't have you come on here to, or we're not running through the 10 Commandments here, and it felt like it was just how to be a good person in 2025 is what I felt like I was listening to. And of course there was some scripture and stuff that went with it, but
and some really good scholarship. Like I feel like I should say that too.
absolutely. The delivery was impeccable.
There we go. Yeah, it was a really good day. Really
Fantastic. No, but that's what I felt like. And I, again, like for me, my wife drugged me to church that day. I didn't want to go. Mm-hmm. I hadn't wanted to go in a really long time. I'm not proud of that. But it's the reality. And I'm 40. Are there of course there are other people like me. Do you see it more now?
I think getting a day in court with people who are in that kind of disenfranchised, if that's their beliefs, then I don't want to be part of it. I think there's a lot of them out there. I really do. And I like to get in conversations with them because it's not just exactly what you expect. The kind people in my neighborhood are not on the news. But when they're trying to sell something, when they're doing something shady, when they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, that stuff makes the news. The worst examples are always the ones that pick up the most press. So that's one of the things that I'm actively thinking about is how do we help some people who don't know that they have a place at the table find a way to link arms and see each other and know that, okay, this is all right. We're going to make it through it. Or even find ways to find common ground with people they disagree with. I understand why people don't want to do that. I understand why people feel like it's a compromise. But I'll just testify in the aftermath of that series, I have had people on the left ask me how I can, with integrity, keep cashing a paycheck from an organization that's da. And I have had people on the right come up to me and ask me how I can, with integrity, cash a paycheck from an organization that's da. And both sides think I don't stand for anything. But what I actually stand for is relationships with God and one another. And I think we've lost track of the people for what we perceive are the principles, and think we need to get those back in line.
Yeah, because it's all we're humans before we're any of that.
Right. We're not just what we do. And I think that cuts into some of the intellectual things that I work on that I think have always been a challenge in human relationships, but it's worse now. So if you want to imagine a magnet, just a fridge magnet sitting on this table, it's made of wood-ish.
What do you think?
It's just a piece of metal at that point, right? Yeah. There's nothing special about it. But you get it near another magnet, and a field forms around that. That's the way relationships work. I was out there someplace, and you were out there someplace, and we didn't have a relationship, and it wasn't making any difference to either one of us. And then we got in proximity to each other, and a relationship formed between us. Like, you stepped into the ring and said, these are the things I've been thinking about, and this is why I want to talk to you. And then I matched it. And now we're in something together, but neither one of us is protecting ourselves. Like, we're in the arena exposed. I get to see this part of you, you get to see this part of me. And we talk about that. That has both people leaving the conversation feeling like they got the better end of the deal, like they learned something, like they've reset their focus. That's the way relationships work. What we've done is changed it to functionality. So think the last time you were at a restaurant. Did you interact with your waiter or waitress, or were they just the robot that brings your food? One is an I-it relationship like I have with any other appliance, and the other is an I-thou, Martin Buber, we call it, me and you relating as people without much agenda. And that's when things really start to change. But it's very hard to do, because how many conversations have you been in the last year? I can name a bunch where I've raised my voice trying to convince people of a point, and I'm losing the relationship. They're just an obstacle to where I want to go. They're not a human being. And so as much as I understand it intellectually, actually doing it in the heat of the moment is really difficult.
I think too, being from rural Iowa and then living in the city and being a media personality, I'll go back, and I mean, half of my high school still lives back there. And I love going back there. Like, I don't have a bad relation. I love my hometown. Like, I get goosebumps thinking about how I could live back there today. But I'll go back there, and some of my friends will just make assumptions about me because I left and I'm in the media, right? And we'll have a conversation, and we'll start off on polar opposite ends, but we always find a way to get back to
You're just Chris.
Yeah.
Like
We
underneath it
always,
all,
yeah.
you're still Chris.
I've never once in one of those scenarios not gotten there.
Right. Exactly.
And where we find gray area in the middle. And the other thing that gives me this perspective is you've lived in rural Iowa too.
Oh yeah. Grew up there.
I do understand because I worked at a small town radio station and KMA radio in Western Iowa. I understand why these people feel like they've been forgotten about too.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So like the city rural divide that I see in my daily life constantly, I'm always trying to tell my city friends, like they feel like you've completely forgotten about them. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're pissed.
Right.
Like they feel like they don't exist in rural Iowa.
Yep.
And a lot of the times they're raising their voice because they think that's the only way that they can get heard.
Well, and if you're not listening when someone's talking at an even voice, they're going to ratchet it up. That's what people do. I mean, even when I was growing up in the 80s, people were moving off the farm. It didn't take as many farmers to do it. And the schools would start to consolidate. And what happens when your school gets taken away from you? You feel like you don't have any identity.
You lose your identity.
Like you don't matter anymore. Just things are just eroding and being taken away. And then when people act like you're less than, and you're out there feeding them all,
Yeah.
and they don't even bother to write a thank you note.
No,
Like,
and not only that, they look down on you and they'll be like, oh, the GMOs and all, it turns into this whole other deal.
Right. And people who've never done anything to raise food are telling you how to raise food when you're like, look, we got to do certain things. So again, it comes to what happens when you get people in relationship with one another and listening, not so that I can make my point next, but just like, I'm curious. So great example, Ragbri Road, right past the back door of our church. So we opened it up for air conditioning and phone charging and all that jazz. And I met some young adults from upstate New York and Boston. They were traveling together. They're all from the Northeast. And they knew I grew up on a farm pretty quick they couldn't even read the body language. I just told them. And I said, so these farms we're driving by, are they family farms or are they corporate farms? And I smiled and I said, well, you're on the right track, but it depends on what you mean. But they were genuinely curious about how food gets grown because they're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Like if we could mandate people to take a walk, both directions.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, if I got into a neighborhood with a car on blocks, I got out of that neighborhood if I was in the city because I was uncomfortable. I don't know the rules. I don't know when I'm getting in trouble. So I think if we could get city folks to hang out at a Casey's for a little bit and drink some coffee.
Yep.
And if we could get the Casey's coffee drinkers to work in a homeless shelter and to see some of the problems that the cities deal with, I think at least, even if we disagreed, we'd understand where the other person is coming from. And now we've got something we can build out from. You know what I mean? Like you've got to have some basic common ground to build out from. We did that sermon series and we used language like the fever breaks. You could see it happening. Well, I'm standing up for what I believe. I stand up for what's right. Okay, if you listen to anybody, you understand why there is a different side than you. Mm-hmm. And it's scary because what if I'm wrong? And like my hobby is to be told I'm right. Being shown that I'm wrong is not my favorite. So do I want to get better? Or do I want to get more comfortable? And that's the basic human question.
I remember the first time I went out east, the Pinstripe Bowl, when Iowa State played out there. Mm-hmm. And I am embarrassed to admit that I was terrified.
Right.
I got to go to New York.
Right.
I have to be out there for 5 days.
How am I going to figure out public transportation? How am I going to know if I'm not safe? Like at home, you can tell when it's starting to heat up. You're like, I know what's about to happen.
Absolutely.
Different body language, different social rules, different unwritten things. And what happens when you're on edge? You do things differently than when you're relaxed, and not for the better, usually. Mm-hmm. And so you get uncomfortable, you start to make mistakes.
Mike Janes, he's the lead pastor at the Ankeny First United Methodist Church. So glad that he's in here with me today. I love that point about seeing how other people live, because an old radio guy once told me about how you never know what somebody else is dealing with when you're having a conversation. Like we'll use your restaurant. Mm-hmm. That server could have gotten a divorce the day before. And if you're a jerk because somebody put tomatoes on your cheeseburger and you asked for it not, like how you could just be piling on.
Especially when that's not the person that messed it up.
Yeah.
You're shooting the messenger.
Yeah.
And when you do stop and find out their name and find out if this is their main job or a side gig for their real dream, it makes the dining experience better. Like, it's always better when you take just a little bit of time to get to know the person that you're dealing with, that you're working with, and not just seeing them as a human version of a cash register.
Mm-hmm. Do you, how do you, the comment sections? I'm very familiar with these.
I would imagine you got the stars to prove it.
Even like my wife is a veterinarian. Like they, they see thousands of people, and like the overwhelming majority of them have great experiences. One of them leaves a nasty, like our comments on our podcast are all 5 stars or they're all 1 stars.
Yeah, exactly. There's not much nuance to it at all.
There's no 4-star.
Yeah, why not just make it smiley face, unhappy face?
Right?
Because that's about all the nuance we've got.
But it takes, in this world, on Yelp, like 2 horrible reviews, and it can take you all the way down. I don't really get on my personal Facebook page anymore. Kind of the same reason I quit going to church there for a while. Just because I don't need you. I don't feel like anybody was yelling at me at church, but it was I don't, I started to feel like every time I went on Facebook, it's just friends and family calling each other idiots.
Right.
And I'm like, this is toxic. Like, this isn't good for me. This isn't, and I also think, like, so what we're talking about with getting to know people, you can't really do that on a comment section, can you?
Well, it's probably possible at least to understand their thought in the same way that reading an autobiography helps you to understand what makes that person tick. But you don't have to. Like, when I'm interacting with you, I can tell pretty quickly if I've stepped in it. I made a joke about something that actually is an exposed nerve for you. On the comment section, I don't know that.
Yeah.
And I don't have to. I can just flame it out. And I would love to tell you that because I'm a semi-public figure, I never do that at all. And a few years ago, a friend posted something about spirituality and how it works in the broader sphere. And I said, well, actually, by definition, that is what that is. And I commented that. I don't know why I commented that. Like, there's not one thing to be gained. He pushed back. I pushed again. I'm having a full-out fight in the comment section with a person I know, but I'm not seeing his face in front of me. I'm not in his presence. I'm just like, you're dumb. This is what that means. I'm just.
We try and one-up each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And, I now that I think about it, I don't think I ever closed the loop on that and apologized to him for doing that right now.
Oh, good. Maybe you get something from this today.
Maybe I get, yeah, exactly. Yay. More difficult things on my to-do list.
Cause that's the thing. Like I watch fans a lot, and this is more of the Twitter thing, I think, for me. But I watch these, like, we get it with Iowa and Iowa State fans all the time. It's just part of the deal. But where it's like, it's like my team's better than yours, but then it'll get personal.
Right.
And the guy will comment on the other guy's weight and his profile picture, and then it gets really nasty really quick. And it's just like, I want to say, you idiots, if you were sitting at the bar together, neither of you would say any of this to each other.
Or if you would, you'd be smiling because you're giving it's banter. And so that's the double-edged sword. Because what we're doing right now isn't possible before the internet.
Yes.
But neither is the comment section. Even letters to the editor were a very different event than the comment section. So as we're starting on another revolution like the internet, what's going to happen with AI? What's that going to look like? What is it going to mean to be human when there are computers that can do certain things faster and better than we can? And I think it's going to come down to, what is your presence like with other humans? That's the irreplaceable part. The quick expressions across your face while you're reacting to what somebody says, what tone of voice you come back with, how quickly you can say, I'm sorry, when you need to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a chance that the pendulum could swing back because we can see this isn't working.
I hope you're right. You made a comment, we were texting the other day. I won't even declare what it was about. I don't even remember, but you said, well, let's build something better. Right. It was your response to me because I was frustrated about something that I saw. I think it was Lee Greenwood selling Bibles, to be honest.
Probably was.
I'm just being honest.
That left a mark.
Yeah, it did. It just bothered me. Like, whatever. And I was like, that's a really optimistic way to look at this, because I have said to people, and I hope I'm wrong, and I am softening, but this is good. But I look at I've just read enough on social media and algorithms and stuff where I have a very dreary view of the future when it comes to communication, especially with our youthful generation and the TikTok and my daughter is 9. So I kind of see the world through her. And I had to explain to her the other day, she has an Apple Watch. I didn't want to get her a phone because I didn't want her to have all the gadgets, but I wanted her to be able to call me so she can call me from her watch and, hey, Dad, practice is over. Where are you at? And I can track her.
Yep.
One of those things. And she has a friend who she was texting with. And my daughter came downstairs into my office, and I could see in her eyes, they were like welling up. And she's like, I think my friend's mad at me. And I said, why? And she read me the exchange. And I was like, sweetheart, like, you're totally reading into this. Like, you're completely, because of so much that can get lost in translation. And I see the anxiety that is going within her at 9 over this relationship. And it probably ruined, knowing my daughter, it probably ruined 2 hours of her weekend.
Yep.
Because she was worried about nothing because of things getting lost in translation. And turns out the little girl was not mad at her, just like old Dad said. Do you see where I'm going with this, though? Because so much can get lost
like that. And I'll read it and I'll just go to red right now. And most days I don't respond, which is good because
I got to hang out with you because I respond. That's my problem.
I'm the grounded one. This is not good news, friend.
I got to stop responding.
Right. But I mean, I'll just fume about that. And then I'll look at it the next day and say, oh, he's just asking what time this is. It's not a challenge. It's just, what time is it?
Yeah. You puff up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the key thing there is to recognize that there's not somebody else that's going to set those limits for you. You know, one of the things that happened when my kids were growing up was smartphones went from that thing that 2 of the rich kids had to the thing that everybody had. Mm-hmm. And incidents of anxiety and depression just spiked. I mean, you don't have to be able to be very good at reading a chart to see what happened in there. Okay, so that's probably not good for me either. You know, they call it doom scrolling for a reason. I can set a timer on my phone and it'll shut me out of certain apps after a certain amount of time.
Which I've recently done that and highly would recommend it to anybody.
Right. And then you have to like not override it. Like that's the whole job.
Yeah. It lets you do that. It drives me nuts.
Right. But you know, when I was a kid, if you had a bad day at school, and those were common in 5th and 6th grade for most people, me included, you'd go home and you got a break from it. It's not showing up on your door. They're not calling your house. You just get to be around your family, whether that was good news or bad news, depending on your stability. At my place, it was great. And the next day you were refreshed, you could try again. Now it's all the time, unless you claim your power to set the technology aside and relate to the people around you.
Okay, I'm sure this stuff happens. Like where we can wear each other out because of the exam. Sometimes like when you drop a call, and have you ever had this where the other person, oh my God, he got in a wreck and died.
Right. Or did I say something that offensive that they just hung up on me? Like,
yeah.
And going to unreasonable
We never had to
conclusions.
worry about that.
Right. Right. So, I mean, it's definitely changed what it means to navigate life as an adult human, for sure. And like I say, it's one more thing to communicate about. When I was coming up through early, I'd be working with couples, and one of the first questions was, is one of you more committed to your friends than the other is? Because if he's got poker night and she's a widow on those nights, you guys should probably talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, now it could be the same thing with the phones. But when they were just coming in smartphones, I laughed at how judgy people were that didn't have a phone and didn't understand how powerful they were. And they'd be like, put your phone down. Can't you break the... And I was like, just wait. And they buy one, and then they go through the same adjustment period of overusing it. And then you kind of come to agreements about, all right, when we're at dinner, we're going to set that over here, and we're going to put it on silent, and we're going to talk to each other.
And I just wonder how many couples like used to watch a show together and now they're scrolling Instagram.
Right. Or they don't have to watch it. I mean, it used to be you had to make an appointment for it at 8 o'clock. And by the way, that was the thing that was going to wreck marriages then too.
Yeah.
They used to have to sit and talk to each other because there was nothing else to do. And then they had radios, and now I can listen to that. So every generation has their kids today moment.
Yeah.
I think.
And
the question is, how quickly are we going to adapt to it?
And every generation thinks the generation before them
doesn't get it.
Yeah. And then then that generation thinks that the younger generation is a bunch of idiots.
Yep. Well, I'm in Generation X, and they all called us the slackers in the 90s. Well, every generation in their 20s is finding their way. Doesn't look like they're making much progress. Doesn't look as motivated as they could, but they're all working on it. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, same things get said about millennials. Oh, I just don't think they're very. Oh, God. And then Gen Z, they're just not going to. They're going to transform the workplaces in ways that are going to bless all kinds of people. Just watch.
Yeah.
Let's all just reserve judgment on that. But let's do the work of adapting so that we still know how to relate to each other.
It's that is such a loaded deal. Like with this, really, it's just all comes down to communication, though, right? I mean, and I still just like I have a hard time. I have like this conscious part of me too that like I run a message board,
right?
So like, am I contributing to the downfall of all of this?
Right.
From that standpoint.
And again, I think it depends on what you do with it. If you give me a hammer, I can, well, not me per se, but let's just say I can help build a house, or I could ram it through your screen. Tools are neutral, but what are we going to do with them? And that commitment to making somebody's day better that you have on this podcast is a really big start in that direction. Is that my intention when I get out of bed in the morning? So just this year, I've started a practice of going through my to-do and my calendar in the morning, and not just saying, oh yeah, I've got Chris at 11 o'clock. It's, all right, how do I want to be in that? What do I expect to offer in this situation? And then I kind of come into it with a different mindset. All right, don't be entertaining. Don't try too hard. Just be a person in this. I've got a difficult counseling meeting. Listen first. Don't assume you know how this story's coming out. Just certain things like that I'll prepare for. And then when I'm in the moment, it feels more grounded. I'm a more peaceful presence because I've thought about it. It doesn't take a lot of time. This is less than 5 minutes. And more than once, I found things on my calendar I had long since forgotten about. So it's kind of a good idea from that standpoint too. But just thinking through, what do I want to offer in each of these situations today? I even handle interruptions better when I do it. Like when I really focus on that and somebody comes through my door, I know I am not going to get this item on the to-do list done. I know exactly what it cost me, so there's no vague anxiety. I'm just like, I will get it later. This person is important right now. So thinking intentionally about what you want to be about, what you want your life story to be about, goes a long way. And for some people, that legitimately is, I want to plant my flag on this piece of ground. For other people, it is, I want to be in relationship in these ways. I want to grow as a person, be a more loving presence. That's going to be different goals and different tasks to get there.
That's kind of the bottom line to everything you've been talking about, though, right? Is the loving presence thing.
Correct. Yes.
I mean, all the stuff we've hit on for almost 40 minutes now, like, doesn't it all come down to that?
It does. And what I believe about God is that God is love. So anytime I experience those relational encounters, like I was talking about, when you get the magnets close to each other, I'm participating in the life of God. The Father loves the Son loves the Father, the Holy Spirit is the relationship in which they dwell, and it's one God. So if I can participate in who God is in my relationships with people, how can it get any better than that? And that can be done with any obstacles in any cultural context. There's always a way to get back to, what do you really hope for? Tell me about your life. How did you get to that conclusion? And be genuinely curious about the answer and not try to convince them of something. And then you might earn a hearing where you get to say your piece that you can do with way less heat because you've already drawn this person into something that's bigger than the two of you.
So a little backstory here. I go to church this day with my wife and kids, and I heard Mike give that sermon, and then I emailed him because I was like, man, right? It's powerful. I just wanted to, I immediately thought, and this probably wasn't the right reason to email you, but I'm like, that would be great content because that's a message I think that my audience would like to hear.
Sure.
I think a lot of the people listening to this particular show know that I'm a weirdo, right, Aiden? I'm a weirdo.
You wear it right on your shirt.
It's not Iowa fans. It's not Iowa State fans. It's just dudes and some gals. Right. But then we went and had coffee because I didn't want to just have you in here. I'm like, well, that would be weird. He doesn't even, and I was ashamed. You've been my pastor for 7 years and I'd never met you.
There's a lot of people out there, though. I mean, in your defense.
There are, and it's a big church, right? This isn't Corinth, Iowa, where the pastor and you know, but I had never sought you out. Never once went up and shook your hand or like, and it was, honestly, I was like ashamed, like, because I like listening to you speak. I always have. I've always been complimentary of you, even from afar.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks. Not everybody does that, I'm sure.
But no, and then we had this coffee, and it's weird. It's like I guess what I'm asking is I'm trying to educate other people out there and see if anybody else can get inspired by my journey. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, like it is a journey. Like I'm not like.
There's no "you are here" with a little X on it.
No.
Like, you're in motion. And that, I think that's
I'm not.
I'm in motion as well.
Okay. Because we actually, in our small group the other night, I kept saying, like, I don't even feel like I have the right to ask somebody else to go to church with me because I don't feel like I'm anywhere. Like, I dropped an F-bomb on my show earlier today.
Just today? Oh,
Yes.
my gosh. Sorry.
I probably shouldn't have done that, you know? But, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I am so worried about being a hypocrite. I don't want to be a hypocrite.
Right. And what I said to you in small group was, well, I think a lot of people envision this line that you have to be over to be able to talk about this. And yet we recommend restaurants all the time that we didn't build, we don't manage, and we don't work at, but we've had a good experience with it. But the other thing that I didn't say in the meeting is I had a roommate at one time and was trying to be a light, you know, was trying to share my faith and things like that, and was trying to say things and trying to be a good person. And it kind of wasn't going very far. And then one day I kind of had a meltdown, and he got to see just how terrified and broken I am. And he later told me that was the turning point. That was when I became an actual human and not a cardboard cutout. You know, and Ned Flanders on The Simpsons is the thing, but he's actually genuinely that guy. But it feels like he's a cardboard cutout. And when even on that show, when he breaks a little bit, you say, okay, this is actually based on reality a little bit.
Yeah.
And so when people see the fullness of what I am, which is composed of good things and things that I would rather not anybody see, they have that opportunity to relate to me without agenda. Like, oh, okay, so you do know.
Yeah.
You do know what that's like. Like, yeah, I know all the parts of speech I can use the F word in. And, you know, like I'm fluent in that language. And that's not necessarily a deal breaker. And in fact, that has opened up some conversations for me that weren't open before. And I'm not saying go out there and like do it wrong and make a point. But I think especially...
I've done my fair share of that, sir. I hope you don't go back into the archives too deep.
I thought about looking through some stuff. Just coming cold. No. Just coming cold.
Hey, I'm an open book. I'm not hiding anything from you. I'm not deleting it. I can promise.
Exactly. So I'm not saying sin boldly, but I am saying bring your whole self.
Yeah, because if
Doubts
you fake
and
it...
strengths and both, right.
It's like if you go to therapy and you're not truthful with your therapist, what are you doing?
What are you doing? You're wasting time is what you're doing. Exactly.
They can't read your mind.
Right.
They can kind of, but not all the way.
You know, going back to that, coming into the exposed space between the no man's land between you and me and sharing something of myself and you doing the same thing and matching it at a similar level or a little more, we start to get closer to each other. Where betrayal sets in is if you misrepresent how much in that space you are. So if you act like you're really committed to me, but you're holding all this stuff behind your back, we're going to have trouble.
Yeah.
There's going to be trust violations and there's going to be problems. So if I can bring my full self into the relationship, we can have an actual relationship and you don't have to relate to the mask.
Yeah, because that's how I view all of this. As we kind of start to put a bow on this, is like, and this is why I wanted to have you in, because it's so toxic out there. And I see it all the time just within, and if you're an Iowa fan, I apologize. I just know Iowa State's fan base so well. And I know I had this happen in Kansas City this year before the Kansas game. One of my buddies, he's a sponsor, love him to death. He is the farthest right conservative I know. I always joke with him that I wouldn't be surprised if you were there on January 6th, buddy. Like I always say that to him, and it's just a joke. And then my other friend, and I'll say Sage Rosenfels, the old Iowa State quarterback, is a hippie. He's a far lefty. Everybody knows that.
I did not know that.
He's on Twitter all the time.
From a coconut? He's like, how about it?
Yeah. And Sage and I, it was a Friday night before Iowa State played Kansas. We were staying at the same hotel, and we went out to a little dive bar that I like in Kansas City. And my other buddy, the giant conservative, rural Iowa guy, I invited him to join us because I knew that he had just got to town. I'm like, now Sage, and I texted my other friend, and I'm like, hey, I'm just warning you. Sage is, you guys could get into it. And like, I
take 25% off before you start.
And those two, I couldn't separate them.
Yep. They matched somehow.
They loved each other.
Yep. Well, and I was in a conversation probably 10 or 15 years
ago. It was beautiful
to watch
those
fun.
Two. Yeah.
But I was in a conversation with two of my friends a few years ago, and one was a little bit to the right, one was a little bit to the left, and I was kind of watching ping pong, like you do. And finally I said, isn't this great? Little slice of America. We've got the left represented, we've got the right represented, and I hold the moral high ground. They still bring that up. They're like, oh, and we'd like to consult with the moral high ground if we can climb up there with you. And it's a running gag, but it's true. When you get people who are different together, there's some amazing things that can happen, but there are very few places where you get to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And so when you get broken out of the echo chamber and actually hear somebody, I remember years ago, I was leading a Bible study, and a teacher had joined the group, and I had two people that worked on the Rock Island Arsenal in the defense contracting thing. And the teacher used the words military industrial complex, and the backs got real straight on the other side of the table. And I'm like, oh no, too soon. Like this could go bad. And he said, I got to throw a flag on that. And he explained his point. And this, I was furloughed the last few times, they did that thing. And I was like, man, I don't know. They're going to come back. This is a voluntary organization. We did prayer requests. Next week, everybody was back. And those two were checking in with each other about how their prayer requests had gone and stuff. And I was like, okay, so I was uncomfortable, but they weren't.
Yeah.
Just where else could they do that? Because in the teacher's break room, there's a political viewpoint, and at the Rock Island Arsenal, it's a different political viewpoint that they're echoing around. Where else are they going to get to meet people from a different walk of life and talk about that stuff?
So the moral of the story here is quit texting, quit posting on Facebook. I'm kidding.
Right.
But we need to do it.
Remember, there's a human being on the other side of that.
Thoughtfully.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's a bot.
I guarantee you, though, Jeff and Sage, if they would have started texting about politics or just started tweeting at each other, it would not have ended that way.
Correct. But they find out they've got common interest, a common level of commitment to their particular cause, probably some certain characteristics in their personalities.
And they're both very generous humans. Like I know both because they have been to the causes that have been important to me in the past.
Yep, exactly. And I've seen the same thing. And I'm a pretty moderate guy, which, like I say, sometimes they say, what do you stand for? And I say, well, I stand for people talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And relating to each other. And the last thing I can say about that is something I repeat a lot. In Jesus' 12 disciples, one of them was a zealot, which means he wanted a violent overthrow of the Roman Empire. And the other person I'm thinking of is Matthew the tax collector, who was on the Roman government's payroll. I mean, it should have been fistfights every day, and they were in the 12, and Jesus didn't do these things at random. He chose them. And I can't believe in my heart of hearts that when you get to the pearly gates, there's going to be a velvet rope line for the left and the right. I mean, if there is moral high ground, I get a fast pass.
You're in.
I get the fast pass.
TSA pre-check.
If I have to think that where I'm already outsized in confidence on that fact, I'd probably be at the back of the line. The last will be first, the first will be last, all that stuff. But I just don't think there's going to be different sections. I think I'm going to stand in the choir next to everybody else. So why not start now?
It's a great way to put it. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you about this upcoming, but it came to my mind. Aiden is he's a great influence on me. I'll let him tell his story at some other day if he wants to. But I talk these Netflix shows. Have you watched many of the like series on the Bible and stuff like that they've been putting out there?
I watched a few episodes of The Chosen. I haven't gotten as far into it as I ought to.
I watched the Moses one.
Okay, I haven't seen that one.
And then I watched the movie Mary. that came out right around Christmas?
I haven't seen that one either.
Okay. Just wondering what you think about some of these, because it's like they are loosely telling Bible stories, which is good, and it gets a guy like, honestly, it got my juices flowing because I like history. So
right, and it's kind of, if you approach it as historical fiction, I think that's a good place to start, because you can't line it up sequentially with one of the Gospels or things like that. I wouldn't study it, but in terms of humanizing these Bible characters, showing some of the impulses that they acted under, how the presence of God can show up for them. I think it sparks your imagination in really important ways that, that's part of the job of preaching, is to tell a story in a way that people can say, oh, I can identify with that in some way, that I can feel like that's my story. I think that's what those shows are doing really well. And they're clearly working with scholars to try to get past the punctuation and into, what was this about? What did it mean? How far can I imagine this scene before I'm in a different story?
And that's another thing, like, where I always have struggled specifically with the Old Testament, because it's just like I analyze things, right? Like, it's a problem. We've covered this. You just wait until you get to know me even more. You're going to be exhausted by me.
Does it get dark in there?
It just gets wild. Aiden knows as well as anyone. Like, my co-host Chris, what did he say to me a couple weeks ago on the show?
He's like, can't you just sit there and have something happen and not overanalyze everything? Just be, oh, okay, and move on.
Yeah, well, if it makes you feel any better, I was once on a mission trip and walked up to a guy who had a real dry sense of humor, very good deadpan. And I said, we haven't overanalyzed anything today. And he said, why do you think that is? I said, I'm not sure, but I think we should think about it together. And it was just, and I was working on my deadpan at that time too.
Well, these bits that are on Netflix and stuff, it's like I sit there and I'm like, oh man, that happened. And then I go, because again, I can't just watch it. Now I'm seeking it out and I'm like, well, that's not true. I've always thought that, like, with the Old Testament, and I always have struggled with taking it literally and taking it like symbolically.
Right. And it's a gray area, and I probably don't perfectly consistently interpret them. I will tell you, those stories are funny. There are a lot of just hysterical bits and irony and hidden Easter eggs and stuff. And I get up in the morning to tell those stories.
Really?
Oh my gosh. We did a series on Abraham a few years ago, and I had so much fun. And I would preface the sermons with, look, I already know I'm going to enjoy this more than you will. And I'm really sorry about that, but let's go. And then I dive in.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But I think the Netflix thing's probably, like, for a guy like me, I think it's a good thing, because it had me watching this Mary movie where, again, like, they're taking some liberties to make this entertaining, but it got me thinking about the story of Christ around Christmas time.
Yep. I've said a lot where I wish there were stage directions in the Bible, because sometimes it's 2 verses and you're like, that had to take all day. What else happened in there? So they imagine what else happened to link the stories together and stuff. And I think that's okay, as long as they put the little asterisk on it and say, hey, don't build your whole belief system on this, but feel this. Like, enter the story and see how it changes you.
Well, this was awesome.
I had a blast.
Did you have a good time?
I did.
I also do want to point out that you can listen to Mike's sermons, and it's the
Being Bright.
Being Bright. You can download. It's the podcast app. So wherever you're listening to this.
Yep.
And then 2 sermons get posted every Sunday.
Yep. One from each of our locations.
And then you can also go on to the Ankeny First United Methodist Church, and they got a video feed set up. And
AnkenyFirst.org, and you can watch archive sermons. We have 2 locations on the same topic every week. So if you're really an overachiever, as somebody in this conversation is, you can listen to both sermons and kind of play them off each other.
Aiden will like this. So first time, I was really intimidated going. I'll be honest with you too. I'm trying to avoid having to give that opening prayer.
Oh yeah, I know.
I don't want to do it.
It's written. You're aware of that, right?
Yeah, but it makes me uncomfortable. I don't feel like I'm worthy.
We're going to work on that.
I don't he makes somebody in the group do the prayer to start,
which is written.
I will not do it, because I'm like, I am not worthy.
But you pray in your mind, right?
Yeah, no, but
Same
like
deal.
to lead it for all these other people. Like, I don't think that I'm worthy to do it for them because they are surely better than me. That's how I look at
How
it.
do you think I feel? I wrote that prayer. Like, oh my gosh, they're going to say this out loud. I hope it's okay.
Yeah, no, it's, I want to have you back though. I promise you we're going to get a ton of reaction on this. And I bet 99% of it will be positive. I really do.
That's the hope. We're trying to turn the lights on.
Trying to make people feel better.
Things are dark enough out there, but there's a way that you can shine a light.
Yeah. And you can go back and listen to those if you would like. And we'd love to have you join us at some point too.
Sounds great.
You have the 2 locations in Ankeny too.
Yep, we do on 36th Street, the Christian Life Center, and then in the Uptown neighborhood on Walnut Street here in Ankeny.
I'm kind of the old school guy. Like I still like the old school church.
That would be Uptown.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Traditional
interesting
on
though,
purpose.
because like, and some people like that,
Oh yeah, for sure.
and then some people though, they like the other one's like literally in a gym with a
Exactly.
stage.
Yep.
And it's more
plugging
like
instruments and the whole deal.
more like modern music and
Exactly.
and all that stuff. And that's really evolved over the years too.
We had a fun one. Somebody accidentally auto played the contemporary service while they were trying to worship on the traditional service online. And so they literally texted somebody at the church and said, "Hey, somebody in the room's got the radio on." I'm like, "That's actually the Christian Life Center. just mute the other one and you'll be fine."
Well, thank you, sir. We
Hey.
appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me
This
on.
was great. We're gonna have. I want to hear at some point. I'm gonna have him back on about because I like to get other writers on here, and I want to hear about how you write sermons.
Absolutely. Again, if you've met one pastor's process, you've heard one pastor's
Well, because there's
process.
so much there, like,
Right.
and then you gotta like kind of circle back, and it's like, okay, we need to hit this again,
Yep, and a 2,000 word essay every single week.
Yeah, I think people would really find it fascinating because the problem was the first time I met you, that's all I wanted to talk about, and I'm like, well, okay, this isn't why we're here.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm still interested. So
Yeah,
keep going.
yeah. He is Mike Janes. Thank you to him for coming on. We appreciate Steeple Ridge Bourbon for sponsoring. Enjoy that, or whoever you give it to, or whatever.
Whatever happens with that, it will be consumed someplace.
Also, our friends at Channel Seed, Aiden for producing, and we'll be back next week with another CW Pod here on Iowa, everybody.